There was once a very worthy king, whose daughter was the greatest beauty that could be seen far or near, but she was as proud as a lucifer, and no king nor prince would she agree to marry. Her father was tired out at last, and invited every king and every prince and every duke and every earl that he knew or didn't know to come to his court to give her one trial more. They all came, and then the next day after breakfast they stood in a row in the lawn, and the princess walked along in front of them to make her choice. One was fat, and says she, "I won't have you, beer barrel." One was tall and thin, and to him she said, "I won't have you, ramrod." To a white-faced man she said, "I won't have you, pale death." And to a red-cheeked man she said, "I won't have you, coxcomb." She stopped a little before the last of all, for he was a fine, fine man, in a face and form. She wanted to find some defect in him, but he had nothing remarkable but a ring of brown curling hair under his chin. She admired him a little, and then carried it off with, "I won't have you, whiskers."
So all went away, and the king was so vexed, he said to her, "Now to punish your impudence, I'll give you to the first beggar man with some straw shucks that calls." And as sure as the hearth money, a fellow all over rags, with hair that came down to his shoulders, and a bushy red beard all over his face, came the next morning, and began to sing before the parlour window.
When the song was over, the hall door was opened. The singer asked in. The priest brought, and the princess married to Beardy. She roared and she bawled, but her father didn't mind her. "There," says he to the bridegroom, "is 5 guineas for you. Take your wife out of my sight, and never let me lay eyes on you or her ever again."
Off he led her, and dismay enough she was. The only thing that gave her relief was the tones of her husband's voice, and his gentle manners. "Whose wood is this?" she said as they were going through one. "It belongs to the king you called Whiskers yesterday." He gave her the same answers about the meadows and cornfields, and at last a fine city. "Ah, what a fool I was," said she to herself. "He was a fine man, and I might have him for a husband." At last they were coming up to a poor cabin. "Why are you bringing me here?" says the poor lady. "This was my house," he said, "and now it's yours." She began to cry, but she was tired and hungry.
Oh well, there was neither a table laid out nor a fire burning, and she was obliged to help her husband to light it, and boil their dinner, and clean up the place after. And the next day he made her put on a stuff gown and a handkerchief. When she had her house readied up and no business to keep her employed, he brought home Sally willows, peeled them, and showed her how to make baskets. But the hard twigs bruised her delicate fingers, and she began to cry. Well, then he asked her to mend the clothes, but the needles drew blood from their fingers, and she cried again. He couldn't bear to see her in tears, so he brought a creel of earth and myrrh. He sent her to the market to sell them. This was the hardest trial of all, but she looked so handsome and so sorrowful that she had a nice air about her. All her pans and jugs and plates and dishes were gone before noon, and the only mark of her old pride she showed was a slap given to a buckheen across the face when he asked her in ignorance. Well, her husband was so glad, he sent her with another creel the next day. But faith, her luck was after deserting her. A drunken huntsman came up riding, and he got in among her ware. She went home crying, and her husband wasn't at all pleased. "I see," said he, "you're not fit for business. Come along, I'll get you a kitchen-maid place in the palace." So the poor thing was obliged to stifle her pride once more. She was kept very busy, and the footman and the butler would be very ignorant about looking for a kiss. But she let a screech out of her first attempt was made, and the cook gave the fellow such a lambasting with the besom that made no second offer. She went home to her husband every night, and she carried the broken victuals wrapped in papers in her side pocket. So the poor thing was obliged to stifle her pride once more. She was kept very busy, and the footman and the butler would be very ignorant about looking for a kiss. But she let a screech out of her first attempt was made, and the cook gave the fellow such a lambasting with the besom.